After I refused to co-own property with my sister, my name was removed from the deed. Until I found what our father had hidden in the walls. My story starts with a house. Not just any house. It was the one our parents built. Not with a big construction company, but with their own 4 hands. A lot of help from friends. And a love so strong you could still feel it in the floorboards. Every mismatched tile in the kitchen, every slightly crooked window frame, was a chapter in my parents' love story. For me and my sister Clara, it was the only home we'd ever known. It was our sanctuary. When our parents passed away within a year of each other, the grief was a physical weight, but we had the house, a testament to their legacy, and they left it to both of us. 50-50. In their will they were clear. May this home always be a place of love and family for our children, Alex and Clara. For the first year it was. We'd meet there on Sundays, sharing memories, feeling their presence in the quiet rooms. I took care of the yard, just like Dad taught me, and Clara tended to Mom's rose bushes. It felt like we were honoring them, but slowly, things started to change. Clara's husband, Mark, began to insert himself into our conversations about the house. Mark was a man who always seemed to be chasing a shortcut to wealth. He had a new unbeatable business idea every other month. None of them ever worked out, but that never seemed to dampen his enthusiasm, or his ability to spend money they didn't have. One Sunday, he spread a bunch of glossy brochures on the old kitchen table. "Alex, my man," he started, with that slick smile he always wore. "Clara and I have an incredible opportunity. A boutique hotel franchise. It's a guaranteed gold mine. We just need some startup capital." I knew where this was going. I could feel a cold dread creeping up my spine. "What does that have to do with the house?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Clara, who had been quiet until then, looked at me with pleading eyes. "Alex, we want to take out a mortgage on the house. A home equity loan. It's the only way." I stared at her, then at Mark. The brochures were sitting on the very spot where Mom used to roll out dough for her apple pies. Mortgaging our parents' home. The home they worked their entire lives to own outright. To leave to us debt-free. It felt like sacrilege. "No," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "Absolutely not. Mom and Dad wanted this place to be a home, not collateral for a risky business." Mark scoffed. "Risky? Alex, this is a sure thing. You're just too scared to take a leap. You're holding your sister back from her dream." "My dream?" I looked at Clara. "Is this your dream, Clara? Or is it his?" She wouldn't meet my eyes. "It's our dream, Alex, and you're standing in the way. It's my house too. I have a right to my half of its value." The argument got ugly. Words were said that I can never take back, and that I'll never forget. I told them they were disrespecting our parents' memory. They told me I was selfish and controlling. I left that day with a pit in my stomach. I hoped, that Clara would come to her senses. A week later, I had to go out of state for 2 weeks to help our aunt, who was recovering from surgery. I tried calling Clara a few times, but she didn't pick up. I figured she was still angry. I sent her texts, telling her I loved her, and that we would work this out. I got no reply. When I came back, the first thing I did was drive by the house. I saw a new flashy car in the driveway. Mark's, no doubt, a sign of things to come. I let myself in with my key, and found the whole place feeling different, colder. On the kitchen table was a letter from the county records office. It was addressed to Clara. My hands were shaking as I opened it. It was a confirmation. A new deed had been filed for the property. Owner Clara Jensen. My name was gone. My blood ran cold. It wasn't possible. You can't just remove someone from a deed. It requires signatures, notaries, legal processes. I frantically searched the envelope and found a copy of the filing. And there it was, my signature. A clumsy, almost childish forgery. But to a clerk who wasn't looking closely, I suppose it was enough. I drove straight to her house. Mark answered the door, a triumphant smirk on his face. "What did you do?" I said, pushing past him. Clara was in the living room, looking at paint swatches. She jumped when she saw me. "Alex, what are you doing here?" I held up the letter. "You forged my signature. You stole my half of our parents' house." She had the decency to look away. "I didn't steal it. I just claimed what was mine. You left me no choice. You were being unreasonable." "Unreasonable? My voice was cracking. Clara, this is our home. Mom and Dad's home. What you did is illegal. It's fraud. Mark stepped between us. Now hold on. It was a simple business transaction. We needed the asset to be liquid. You'll get your share once the hotel takes off. You just have to be patient. My share. I laughed, but it was a bitter, broken sound. There is no my shares anymore. You took it. You forged my name and stole it. Clara finally looked at me, her eyes hard. You should have just agreed, Alex. Then we could have done this together. This is your fault. That's what broke me. Not the theft, not the forgery. It was her complete refusal to see the monstrous thing she had done. In her mind, she was the victim. I was the villain for not letting her gamble away our inheritance. I left, my mind a storm of rage and heartbreak. My sister, my own flesh and blood, had chosen her greedy husband and a fantasy of wealth over me, over our family, over our parents' memory. I did what anyone would do. I went to a lawyer. He was sympathetic but realistic. He said forgery cases are complex. It would be my word against hers. We'd have to hire handwriting experts. It would be a long, brutal and very, very expensive court battle that could drag on for years and drain my savings. A battle I might not even win. I felt utterly defeated. I fell into a dark place. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, her cold justification. I saw Mark's smug grin. They were living in a new, bigger house, driving that new car, all funded by the loan they'd secured against my home. They'd started renovating our parents' house too. A neighbor told me they were planning to flip it, tearing out Mom's kitchen, painting over the height chart we'd marked on the doorframe as kids. They were erasing our history. I was at my lowest point when I remembered something Dad used to say. A man's workshop is his sanctuary. Everything you need to fix a problem is in there. You just have to know where to look. One night, unable to bear the four walls of my apartment, I drove to the old house. I knew they wouldn't be there. I still had my key. I let myself in. The smell of fresh paint and drywall dust hit me. A sterile scent that had replaced the familiar smell of home. It was a ghost of what it once was. I went out to the garage, to Dad's workshop. It was the one place they hadn't touched yet. Everything was as he'd left it. The scent of sawdust and oil was still in the air. I ran my hand over his old workbench, the wood worn smooth by years of his labor. I wasn't looking for anything in particular. I was just looking for a connection, for some kind of peace. My fingers brushed against a loose piece of pegboard on the wall behind the bench. I'd never noticed it before. It was cut differently from the rest. Curious, I pried at it. It came away in my hand, revealing a small dark cavity in the wall, a hidden compartment. My heart started pounding. Reaching inside, my fingers closed around a slim leather-bound journal and a small heavy metal box. I took them back to my car, not wanting to stay in that desecrated house a moment longer. Under the dome light of my car, I opened the journal. It was my father's. His familiar neat handwriting filled the pages. It wasn't a diary of daily events, but a collection of his thoughts, his worries, his plans. I started reading, and my world tilted on its axis. He wrote about us. He wrote about his love for me and Clara, but he also wrote about his fears. He'd seen a side of Clara, even as a young woman, that worried him. A tendency to be easily swayed, a yearning for the easy life. And he wrote about Mark. He'd never trusted him. He called him a man with a hollow soul and a hungry wallet. My dad had seen it all, years ago. Then I got to an entry that made me stop breathing. Clara is a good girl, he wrote, but Mark has a hold on her. I fear that one day he will convince her to do something foolish with this house. I cannot let that happen. This house is my family's anchor. I have spoken to Davison. He has helped me set up a fail-safe, a gift of protection for Alex, who I know will always cherish this place. The real strength isn't in the deed, it's in the trust. A trust that cannot be broken. A trust, Mr. Davison. I remembered him. He was our family's old lawyer, long since retired. The journal entry gave a date. I turned my attention to the metal box. It was locked. There was no key. I drove to a 24-hour locksmith and had them open it. Inside was not what I expected. There wasn't money or gold. There was a single ornate key and a single sheet of paper. It was an official-looking document, a legal declaration. It was a copy of the founding document for the Harris family irrevocable trust. My parents hadn't just left us the house in their will. They had placed the property into an ironclad trust. My father, in his wisdom, had created a legal fortress around our home. I was listed as the trustee. Both Clara and I were equal beneficiaries. But there was a clause, a very specific, very powerful clause. My father had nicknamed it the Guardian Clause. It stated, in no uncertain terms, that the property held in the trust could never be used as collateral, security, or leverage for any loan related to a speculative business venture. And here was the kicker: if any beneficiary knowingly attempted to do so, their status as a beneficiary would be immediately and permanently nullified, and their share would be automatically absorbed by the remaining beneficiary. I read it again and again. A slow, cold wave of understanding washed over me. The deed Clara had me sign off on through forgery. It was just a regular county deed. It was, in the grand scheme of things, a piece of paper. The true unbreakable ownership was held by the trust. My father, fearing exactly what had happened, had created a trap that my sister and her husband had just willingly, eagerly, and illegally walked right into. By forging my name and using the house to get a bank loan, Clara had triggered the Guardian Clause. She had, with her own greedy hands, signed away her entire inheritance. She just didn't know it yet. A hot, fierce anger surged through me, but it was different this time. It wasn't the helpless rage of a victim. It was the focused, glacial calm of a man who had just been handed a sword. My first instinct was to call her, to scream, to tell her what she'd done, and that the house was now mine. All mine. But then I looked at my dad's journal. He hadn't set this up for a quick victory. He'd set it up as a fail-safe, a gift of protection. Revenge, I realized, wasn't about a quick, angry confrontation. True justice, the kind my father would have appreciated, was about letting them see the full consequences of their actions. So I made a new plan, a better plan. First, I had to find Mr. Davison. It took me a week of calling old law firms and contacts, but I finally tracked him down. He was living in a quiet retirement community a few hours away. I called him and told him who I was. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Alex," he finally said, his voice raspy with age, "I've been wondering if you would ever call. Your father was a very wise man. I have the original trust documents here in my safe. I think it's time we had a talk." I drove to meet him the next day. He was a kind-faced man with sharp eyes that hadn't faded with age. He laid out the original documents on his dining table. It was all real. He confirmed everything. The trust was absolute. The house was protected. "Your sister committed fraud on 2 levels, he explained, peering at me over his glasses. "First, she forged your signature on a county deed transfer. Second, and far more seriously, she presented that fraudulent deed to a federally insured bank to secure a loan, claiming to be the sole owner of an asset she in fact does not have the legal right to leverage. When the bank finds out, well, it's not going to be pleasant for her." "So what do I do?" I asked. "Legally," he said, "the moment she signed that loan agreement, her share of the trust transferred to you. The house is yours, Alex. 100%. We just need to file the paperwork, notify the trust, and it's done. We can inform the bank, and they'll go after her and her husband for the money." I thought about it for a moment. I could end it right there. A phone call, a few legal letters, and it would be over. But where was the justice in that? They'd declare bankruptcy, get a slap on the wrist, and move on to their next scheme. They wouldn't learn. They wouldn't understand the depth of their betrayal. They needed to feel the weight of their choices, just as I had. "No," I said, looking Mr. Davison in the eye. "Not yet. We do nothing for now. We wait." He raised an eyebrow. "Wait for what?" "For them to fail," I said. "Mark's businesses always fail. It's just a matter of time. I want them to have it all, to believe they've won. I want them to be standing on the edge of the cliff they built for themselves. Then and only then will I push them off." A slow smile spread across Mr. Davison's face. "Your father would be proud," he said. He was a patient man too. And so my silent revenge began. I played the part of the broken, defeated brother. I ignored Clara's occasional texts asking if I was over it yet. I let them continue with their lives, thinking they had gotten away with it. Through a friend of a friend, I kept tabs on them. They poured the loan money into their boutique hotel idea. They bought expensive furniture, went on lavish vacations, and posted it all over social media. They were living the high life on the back of our parents' legacy. Every smiling photo they posted was another twist of the knife in my gut, but it also hardened my resolve. I documented everything. I saved the social media posts. I got copies of the loan documents they'd filed, showing the fraudulent deed as collateral. I took photos from the street of the expensive cars and the extravagant parties. I was building a case, not just for the law, but for the final, inevitable family reckoning. As I predicted, after about 8 months, the cracks started to show. The boutique hotel wasn't the goldmine Mark had promised. It was a money pit. I heard through the grapevine that they were struggling to make their loan payments. The happy social media posts stopped. They were replaced by a desperate silence. Then came the registered letter I had been waiting for. It was a notice of default from the bank, addressed to Clara at the old house. They had missed 3 payments. Foreclosure proceedings were about to begin. The bank was coming to collect the asset she had promised them, an asset that was never truly hers to give. The trap was set. It was time to spring it. I didn't call her. I didn't text. I called my aunt, my cousins, all the family members who had heard Clara's side of the story, and had looked at me with pity and disappointment. "I'm hosting a family meeting," I said to each of them, "at Mom and Dad's house, Sunday afternoon. It's about the future of the property. It's important that everyone is there. Clara and Mark will be there too." The day arrived. I got to the house early. The tacky, modern renovations they'd done felt like a scar on my soul. The warm rustic kitchen was now all sterile white and stainless steel. The cozy living room was cold and minimalist. They had stripped the house of its heart. I brought 2 things with me: Dad's journal and a briefcase containing every piece of evidence I had gathered. Mr. Davison arrived shortly after, looking dignified and serious in a dark suit. He was my ace in the hole. The family started to trickle in, their faces a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Clara and Mark were the last to arrive. Clara looked stressed, her face pale. Mark, however, still had a hint of his usual arrogance. He probably thought I was going to beg for a handout, or finally offer to help them with their financial mess. We all gathered in the soulless living room they had created. Clara spoke first, her voice tight. "Okay, Alex, what is this about? If you're here to say I told you so, you can save it. We've had some temporary setbacks, that's all." Mark chimed in. "A slight cash flow issue. We'll have it sorted out. In fact, if you'd be willing to chip in a little, we could." I held up a hand, silencing him. "I'm not here to talk about your business," I said, my voice steady. "I'm here to talk about this house, our parents' house." I opened my father's journal and placed it on the coffee table. "I found this," I said, looking around at my family. "It's Dad's journal. He wrote a lot about this house, and about his wishes for it, and his fears." I looked directly at Clara. "He was afraid that one day your husband would convince you to do something foolish. He was afraid you would try to sell it or borrow against it for one of his schemes." Mark started to bluster. "Now listen here." "No, you listen," I said, my voice dropping laced with ice. "Because of that fear, Dad did something very smart. He didn't just leave us the house in his will. He created a fortress to protect it. He put it in an irrevocable trust." I gestured to the quiet man sitting in the corner. "This is Mr. Davison. He was Dad's lawyer. He set up the trust, and he holds the original documents." A ripple of confusion went through the room. Clara looked at Mark, a flicker of fear in her eyes. Mr. Davison stood up and addressed the room. "It's quite simple. The Harris family trust owns this property. The trust deed supersedes any county deed. One of the key provisions of that trust, what Mr. Harris called the guardian clauses, forbids the property from being used as collateral for a business loan." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "Furthermore," he continued, his voice resonating in the silent room. The clause states that any beneficiary who attempts to do so forfeits their claim. Their share is automatically transferred to the other beneficiary. The color drained from Clara's face. She looked like she had been punched in the stomach. Mark's smug facade finally crumbled, replaced by a mask of pure panic. What are you saying? Clara whispered. I stood up and walked over to the coffee table, placing the thick file of my evidence next to my father's journal. I'm saying, I began, my voice clear and ringing with the finality of it all, that when you forged my signature to take my name off the deed, you weren't stealing from me. You were stealing from a trust. And when you took that fraudulent deed to the bank and signed a loan agreement using this house as collateral, you triggered the clause. I let that sink in. I looked at my aunt, my cousins. Their mouths were agape. You didn't just break my trust, Clara. You broke the legal binding trust our father set up to protect us, to protect this family's legacy. And in doing so, you gave up your half. You signed it all away. I picked up the notice of default from the bank. I know you're in default. I know the bank is about to foreclose. But here's the final twist you didn't see coming. They can't foreclose on this house, because you secured a loan with an asset you never had the authority to offer. The house is safe, because as of 8 months ago, the moment you signed that loan, 100% of the Harris family trust, and this house, legally belongs to me. Clara just stared at me, silent tears streaming down her face. It wasn't a look of remorse. It was the look of someone who had been caught. Mark finally found his voice, a desperate, pathetic squeak. You can't do this. We'll be ruined. They'll come after us for the money. Yes, they will, I said, my voice devoid of any sympathy. The loan is in your name. The debt is yours. What you committed is called bank fraud. I'm sure they'll be very interested to learn how you secured their money. You built this mess. Now you get to live in it. I turned to the rest of my family. I'm sorry you all had to be here for this, but you needed to know the truth. You needed to know what was done to our parents' memory. There was nothing more to say. The truth was laid bare in the middle of that cold, empty room. Clara and Mark left without another word, a pair of ghosts shuffling out of a house that was no longer theirs in any sense of the word. My family surrounded me, apologizing, hugging me, their eyes full of a new understanding. But it brought me little comfort. In the end, I won. I got the house back. I called the bank's fraud department the next day, and with Mr. Davison's help, explained the situation. An investigation was launched, and the foreclosure proceedings were dropped. The full weight of the bank's legal team turned its attention to Clara and Mark. They lost everything, and last I heard, they were facing serious federal charges. I got my revenge. But as I stand in this house today, slowly and painstakingly tearing out their cheap renovations, and trying to restore the warmth my parents built into it, I can't say it feels like a complete victory. I saved my parents' legacy, but I lost my sister. The silence in these halls is a constant reminder of the price of betrayal and the heavy cost of justice. My father's fail-safe worked. It protected the house, but it couldn't protect our family from breaking. And that's a tragedy no legal trust could ever prevent. Thank you for listening to my story. It's been hard to share, but I hope it serves as a reminder to cherish what's truly important. If you were moved by this story, please hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done in my situation? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next story. And please share this video with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you.